when I think about making something happen in the world, selling something, getting a donation, getting voted for, whatever the transaction is, I always break down that world into sales and marketing. And I think that I spend a lot of time these days in the marketing funnel and really helping a lot of my digital startups and my friends in digital marketing. Oh, thank you so much. Good reaction to the darkness. Jets jersey, that makes me super happy. I'm trying to convince a lot of people to go from sales to understand the value of marketing. But I'll tell you right now, through and through, when I pass away and they open me up, I am a salesman through and through, and I've been my whole life. Big ups to the salespeople. So coming to a sales conference is a lot of fun for me, and I think there should be more of them in our space, because I think the issue with a lot of my marketing friends and people is it's very up in the clouds, and it doesn't really end up creating the thing that I think we're all tied to, which is the transaction. What is the KPI? Like, what are we actually trying to do? I'm gonna give you a little background of where I came from for the people in here that don't know my story, because I think it matters. And then I wanna talk about what I would do if I was in this audience. I think what I try to do as a salesman is I try to reverse engineer. I try to figure out while on stage who the audience is. I try to figure out what Simon and Seth and Ariana and Frederick have already said, because I know their spiels really fucking well. And I'm trying to think about what can I say that's different, that is gonna actually bring value. And the truth is, and I know those four very well, Frederick I think is a purebred salesman. But I really do think that I was born very lucky, and that I think my parents are very opposite, and I think I feel very in kinship with my marketing and with my sales. And so that's what I want to focus on, because I think a lot of people here could make a lot more money if they eliminated two things. One, laziness, to be very frank, and two, idealistic points of view of how they've made their money in the past. I think one of the biggest concerns I have sitting here in a world where I'm hungry to get 1 to 2 people, 3 people to get a lot of value out of this talk, is the way you made your money before is my enemy. The way you've been successful yesterday is my enemy. It is stunning if you understood what runs through my head every morning on how little I think anybody should give a fuck about anything I achieved yesterday back. You're really only as good as your last at bat. And the thing that I'm most passionate about, and I think many of you guys and gals can agree with me on this, is the landscape of sales and all of communication in our society has had a fundamental shift over the last decade because of technology. And there's just a lot of people that are doing things that are not bringing them real value for their actions. My religion in sales is attention. Before I even think about how to sell you my SaaS product because it's better than the one that you're using, or my wine, or why you should use VaynerMedia and my agency, or a new pair of sneakers, or whatever you're selling in this room, mid-market, enterprise, small startup, the one thing that connects us is the end person's attention. And this is what I want to focus on at first. My career of being obsessed around attention started when I was 6, and I'm not kidding. This is an interesting story. I was born in the Soviet Union. I came here as a kid. My dad eventually got a job as a stock boy in a liquor store in New Jersey. I originally lived in Queens, then I grew up in Edison, New Jersey. In Edison, when I was 6 and 7 years old, I tricked, manipulated, sold. I sold my friends on the idea of standing behind a lemonade stand all day. And so when I was 6 years old, I had a 6 lemonade stand franchise in Edison, New Jersey. How many of you remember Big Wheels, those little bikes? You guys remember? I used to ride my Big Wheels at the end of the day every summer and pick up my cash like I was little Tony Soprano or something. So I was a salesman early on, but it's funny, the reason my friends were behind the register selling the lemonade and I wasn't, it wasn't because I was fancy, it wasn't because I didn't want to do the work, it's because, and this is me now realizing this years later, it was because I was obsessed with attention. While my homies stood behind the lemonade stands, I walked up and down the streets. By the way, for a lot of the youngsters in here, this was the 80s when kids just went outside and did random shit. So I would walk up and down the streets, and literally, this is how sick I am. I would sit at the cross sections of streets, Tingley Lane in New Jersey, Inman Avenue in New Jersey. I would sit there and I would watch people, I would sit there for an hour. I'm 7, 6, 7, 8 years old. I would sit there for hours and I would watch cars drive by and I would try to see if I could see their faces and I could figure out which tree or pole to put the lemonade stand sign on, because that would be the better one because they would see it and buy lemonade. It was intuitive to me at such a ridiculous age that the number one asset was the attention. And then what I had to say is what mattered. That the creative, that the product, that the copy was the variable, that the thing I said on the other side of the phone was the variable. But before I could say it, no matter how good my game was, did I actually have their attention, or was I speaking to somebody that wasn't paying attention? I believe that the far majority of this room has become disconnected with the reality of the end consumer's attention that we have taken for granted, whether through laziness, not being compensated for it, or whatever other variable you are, not being good at what you do, I don't know. I believe that the market of sales has lost its way. I think it's the speed of attention shift emailing somebody when they weren't expecting it has now become stealing one's time. Because we have the alternative of, when that person calls, you can say, just text me, just email me. I will call you back on my time. It is my belief that when I audit the sales ecosystem and all the startups I'm involved with and all the businesses I'm involved with, that salespeople steal their clients' time for their vested interests instead of reverse engineering the value of that person's time. It is in our best vested interest to send that email. It is in our best vested interest to make that phone call. We are not reverse engineering the fact that these people have become busy. Now, another thing that's extremely fascinating for me being in this room is I grew up in B2C my whole life, right? Only 7 years ago when I started VaynerMedia did I go into the B2B world. Just for the people that don't know here, I have a 650 person social digital agency that I've grown in the last 4 years from a $3 to a $100 million business in sales, not fucking valuation. And by the way, that's another conversation for another fucking day. And I think the thing that will be interesting to a lot of people here is I've done that mainly on not selling. Like, we don't really do RFPs. I'm not interested in selling somebody who, I would tell you my number, like if somebody said, what's your most religious sales tactic? It is not to try to sell to somebody who's unsellable. I think one of the most fascinating things that I audit when I look at the sales ecosystem is how much people take time trying to convert somebody who's unconvertible. Yes, your product might be 8,000 times better, but if that boss's boss is best friend homies with the alternative legacy software, you fucking lost. And then I watch people think that they're gonna convert it on merit. There's no fucking merit. There's just human beings making human decisions. And I think we need to get a lot less romantic about that and start being much more practical about the ecosystem. Let me tell you another way that I've grown that business that I think, as instead of pontificating and cursing up here, let me give you a direct tactic that I think a lot of you guys can use. A couple books ago, because I decided to write those kind of things, I wrote a book called The Thank You Economy. Super interesting to me. It's the notion of if you provide so much upfront value to an individual, can you actually guilt them into buying shit? Especially if all your actions are predicated on not expecting them to buy it. That's the big part. When the energy of your tactics is to convert, you will lose. When your energy is to disproportionately bring value and let the chips fall where they may, you will win. It will change your behavior. It will change the energy of the execution. Let me give you a story. VaynerMedia, there was a certain CMO that I really wanted to get to because I wanted their business, right? I don't like doing RFPs because it's a crapshoot and we're not very good at them, right? And I have the fortunate nature of having a brand, so a lot of business comes to me, but this one wasn't, and I wanted it. So I decided to follow, and this is my number one tactic for every person in this room, that I am positive that if you actually put in the work and do it, that you will email me. And this is really, the reason I'm giving this is because I want you to email me in 4 months and be like, hey Brand, I saw you in New York at the Sales Machine Conference. I thought you were a little bit ridiculous, but I did this thing and it actually worked. Cool, thanks. That's it, that's what I want. And here's the tactic. How many people here are in B2B sales? Raise your hand. Awesome. Coming from B2C and now being in B2B and being part of companies like Buddy Media and Percolate and Wildfire that we've had successful exits in, and watching the landscape of sales in that environment, I've done very well with my B2B investments. I am stunned how much easier it is to be a B2B salesman than a B2C salesman. You literally know the name of the fucking person you're selling to. This is a big deal. This is a big deal because by knowing the name in 2016, you have the opportunity to use big data in your advantage on a micro level to create the world that you want. Let me explain. I found the CMO that I wanted on Twitter. Some of the people that you're trying to get to won't be on Twitter. They may be on LinkedIn, they may be on Facebook, they may be on Instagram. But the fun part is 60 to 70% of your prospects are on one of these platforms and putting out data publicly on what they like and what they're into. I followed this individual and I noticed that he was a humongous St. Louis Cardinals baseball fan. This is when my plan went into action. I started watching everything he was tweeting about. Ironically, I'm like a cobra in the grass. I'll tell you, the number one thing that I think really separates good salespeople from bad salespeople is patience. I'm patient as fuck, right? So I was staying in the grass, just waiting, collecting content, being patient, really mapping what he's into, paying attention. Ironically, it coincided with my fantasy baseball league, right? So I'm in my fantasy baseball draft. I've got the team I want. I've got a couple of empty slots on the reserve thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna draft this up-and-coming rookie Cardinals player for maybe other reasons than just winning my fantasy baseball team. So I draft a guy. Any Cardinals fans in here? Any couple, maybe 2 or 3? I drafted a guy by the name of Kolten Wong, infielder for the St. Louis Cardinals before he was even in Major League Baseball. And so then I wait. And I wait for Kolten Wong to get up to the major leagues. And I wait for Kolten Wong to do something good. And then I see what I needed to. Him tweeting about Kolten Wong, which allowed me to jump into that tweet and say, hey, I have Kolten Wong on my fantasy team. Isn't he awesome? And he replied, yeah, he's awesome. That's it. Patience, remember? Don't close on the first date, all right? So we interact a little bit more about the Cardinals. They're making their playoff run, and somewhere about 3 weeks later, he tweets me back and says, hey, I see that you're a CEO of a digital agency. We're thinking about, maybe changing up our roster a little bit. Is this something we could talk about? We sure fucking can. I want to give you real data here. Less than an hour of work, being patient, spread off of probably about 4 months. I was able to convert that strategy into a $3.6 million paying client, right? Sales, but sales not that look like, here's a blank email that I'm gonna blast. Everybody is obsessed with scalability. Everybody is obsessed with scalability. And all the action in sales is scaling the unscalable. I believe that sales, even in today's environment, is still a very face-to-face game, right? I think a lot of us agree with that. I think the biggest disconnect from the people that just heard that in this room, that have done that their whole lives, that were like, yeah, hell yeah, is that they don't realize that technology is now the scalable gateway drug to the human interactions. I'm going to Cleveland right now after this. There's a basketball game I want to see. And I'm gonna sell on that plane on the way there because I'm using technology, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and these platforms as a gateway drug to create an interpersonal relationship. There are people I know very well that I've spent very little time with in real life, but I do that through those channels, and then when we see each other, there's a total different feeling I have for these 3 individuals. These are people I could never even have a relationship with without this technology. These are people that I haven't met more than once, but I feel enormous kinship towards them and the dude with the Jets jersey because I've put in the sales work. Why do you go golfing with a client? Why do you eat a fucking steak with a client? Why do you go to networking events? You do it to create context at scale. You do it to create context. The absolute closer and the enabler and the jabbing and the flirter and that essence of energy is context, right? If you know that girl's, boyfriend, if you know their interest in the Cardinals, you have a leg up on the competition. It's why you spend time with your clients and the decision makers and the influencers of the decision makers, because you are building context. What technology today does, and these 5 or 6 platforms that are the current state of social media do, all at the fingertip of your phone when you're going to take a piss or flying to Cleveland or whenever you want, ultimately scalable. You can do it at any time, 6 p.m., 1 a.m., whenever you want, however you roll. You get up early, you get up late. You can hustle in these platforms and create context. And the fact of the matter is, almost nobody does it. Nobody does it because they lack patience. Do you know how many of you in this room have a point of view on what Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter can do for your business and you've never used the fucking product? It's real. Thanks for that one clap, I liked it. And so we live in 2016 in a world where the majority of you, when you live like a normal human being and don't put on your sales outfit for the day, would never convert on the actions that you take as a salesperson during the workday. The amount of you that delete every fucking email that you get, that is a bulk email, the amount of you that will never answer that phone, the amount of you that would never, who here is super fired up to go home and go through their direct mail carefully? And so I'm fascinated by the disconnect of who you are as a human being and how you act when it's in your vested financial interest for another human being to act the way you want because it's more convenient for you. That is the arbitrage. And that will always be the arbitrage, forever. So many of you have done business because of word of mouth, right? How many people here have landed more business because of word of mouth from a prior transaction? Raise your hands. If you didn't raise your hand, you just don't fucking understand or you're lazy, and that's fucking interesting too. When I think about social media, all I think about it as the plumbing of word of mouth in our society. I'm fascinated by how much business I do with somebody after I actually sell them and what I do with them to create that word of mouth versus what I did to get them in the first place. The enormous amount of energy that we all deploy as salespeople to get the business versus what we do with that business, even if it's handed off to an account person. If you were that point of reference, your ability to stay in that ecosystem and bring value is incredible. And again, I implore you to understand the value of public data. Let me give you a B2C scenario, but you can deploy this in your own world. Wine library. Before Thank You Economy, I wanted an example for my keynotes about how I was doing the Thank You Economy. So I was very passionate about having somebody buy something on Wine Library that was inexpensive and then overwhelming them with a gift based on their big data. I love sports, so no question, this is another sports story. Guy buys a case of Pinot Grigio for $111. We made 17 bucks in profit on the case. We had to find people with unusual names because we had to find them on Twitter, and this was still 2011. So finally we found one. They were having a tough time finding people on Twitter that were buying wine for the first time. I wanted a first-time customer. Guy buys a case of Pinot Grigio in Chicago. We made 11 bucks. They find him, he has an unusual name like Vaynerchuk, you know. We find him, it's definitely him. And we look and we find his Twitter. His whole Twitter stream is about Jay Cutler, the quarterback of the Chicago Bears. Just tons of Jay Cutler, I love you, Jay Cutler this, da, da, da. Great. I tell the thank you department, which is something we have at Wine Library, which is not customer service, it's offense. Customer service is defense. The thank you department kicks in, and we go and buy him a $350 jersey signed by Jay Cutler, and we send it to him. ROI negative on that transaction, I think we can all agree. And so now I'm pumped. We finally found somebody, we sent it. My keynotes are coming up. I'm gonna have a great case study. He's gonna buy a lot of wine. He's gonna do something. It's gonna be unbelievable. I can't wait to tell all of you. 3 weeks go by. Motherfucker didn't get back to us. So I'm like, what the fuck? Ungrateful asshole. So nothing. I'm like calling 4 times today. I'm like, you sure? Like, I know it's in spam. Like, get the IT department. I'm like, this is impossible. Nothing. I'm boarding a plane to Orlando. I get a phone call. Gary. I'm like, yeah. They're like, we got something. I'm like, finally. I'm like, what did he do? Better. I'm like, okay, better. They're like, listen to this. I'm like, okay. We just got an order from Plano, Texas. I'm like, okay. For $6,000 worth of red Burgundy. I'm like, great. Now, that's great, but wait till you hear the note in the order. I'm like, cool. Dear Wine Library, first of all, what a great red Burgundy selection you have. Make sure you don't ship this, it's hot here. Hold it for a while, ship it when it's cooler. Next, P.S. You sent my friend John a Bears jersey the other day when he bought some wine from you. P.S.S. I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. For very little money and for a solid amount of effort, you could go home from this conference and go through your entire Rolodex of everybody that you sold something to in the last year, go on social media, look at their data, and do something that shows effort. Let me tell you what's not effort. The at scale handwritten note that wasn't handwritten, it was just a tactic to fake effort. What about actual effort? What about actually sending me something about the Jets or root beer or Lionel Richie, because it's very easy to figure out I like those three things. What people are underestimating is the word of mouth ecosystem that we actually live in, because this thing has changed our behavior. I don't know if you've noticed, but we now have all defaulted into this amazing notion that we should tell the world everything about everything, always about everything. It's what we do. For some reason, everybody needs to know our 2 cents on the game last night, on where the world's going. This is what we do, we share now. You may not like it, it's the reality of the marketplace. And one thing that people share more than anything is when they are caught off guard, or that they can feel that somebody gave them more effort than the market. My belief is that the greatest version of a person in the world is a purebred salesperson. Let me tell you why. My definition, one man's definition of a purebred salesperson is one that is obsessed with providing more value to the other person than they ask for in return. When you make that mental shift, and more importantly, when your actions start speaking that, things start to massively unlock. I have built both of my very large businesses on one backbone, which is I want to know what this person's going to say at my funeral. I have no interest in selling in something I don't believe. I know for fact that there's a staggering percentage of people here, as they become educated in the market they sell in, that they actually do not believe that their product is the best. I could not function in that environment. I'm not judging you. We all have our different paths and different things. Loans, mortgages, respect. I'm not trying to go there. But I would tell you that when you fully believe in what you sell, through and through, it gets a hell of a lot easier. When you actually give a fuck about the other person more than you, it gets triple easy. It gets triple easy, my friends. And so I implore all of you to understand that we are living through a marketplace now where our consumers have more information than ever. You're not gonna win a deal on inefficiency of information of our consumer. And so I implore you to start producing 2 things. 1, leading with the heart and reverse engineering what your end consumer, whether they bought from you or they're your prospect, what makes them tick above and beyond being the decision maker of your fucking product. And number 2, start thinking about the people you've sold to after you've sold to them, and understand what they can mean to your business by you actually caring about them as well, because they're still valuable to you even though you hooked up. Got it?